Stuart Holman here, good to be with you again as we listen in at the Last Supper. We're listening in to Jesus on his final night with his disciples, the final night before he's crucified. Knowing exactly what's about to unfold, Jesus' parting words of encouragement and teaching carry even greater weight. We're up to John 15, where Jesus says, "I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me, as I also remain in you." No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. Some commentators place Jesus walking from the upper room where the Last Supper was held, and he's walking now to the Mount of Olives with his disciples, and he comes upon a grapevine. Perhaps it was beautifully cared for, or maybe it was just wild and woody. It's speculation really, but it may well have made for an interesting visual aid. We don't know. What we do know though is that Israel was supposed to be God's vineyard, looked after by diligent and trustworthy religious leaders. The prophet Isaiah in Isaiah 5, 1-17 told a tragic parable about the failure of God's vineyard. After God had done everything possible so that his vineyard would produce good fruit, it remained uselessly unproductive. Worse, it produced the bad fruit of injustice and unrighteousness. So, in Isaiah's parable, God abandons his vineyard, allowing it to be overrun. It becomes wild and woody. So when Jesus says in verse 1 that he is the true vine and God his Father is the gardener, immediately we're reminded of Isaiah 5. What's different here is that Jesus is the true vine, the true Israel, the one who actually was what God wanted and expected from his people, his true people. Jesus, not national Israel, stood on good terms with God. And so the only way that Jesus' disciples could be truly the people of God was if they were in connection with Jesus. So how does anyone, even us, truly be the people of God? We can't do it on our own, no more than the Old Testament Jews could do it on their own. The only way is by being connected as a branch to the vine. Remember, we're thinking grapevines here. The vine is the root and the trunk, and the branches are the horizontal limbs that grow along the runners and produce the actual grapes, the good fruit. So Jesus is the true vine, and we want to be his branches. But God the Father is a good vine trimmer. I think that makes God the viticulturalist. He trims the vine at the end of every season in just the right way so that it will grow strong and be even more fruitful next season. He prunes, he tends, he nurtures, all for the good. But the dead wood, the dried up branches, he removes them. When we get to verse 3, Jesus says to those gathered with him, his disciples, that they are clean. That's literally the same word as pruned or cut back in verse 2. God the gardener has already pruned clean Jesus' disciples through his word. And so Jesus completes the word picture of the vine and the branches. The branches, that is, his disciples, they need to be well connected to the vine, Jesus, in order to really be the people of God, the people that God always intended for his own. Now there's a sense in which everything Jesus wants to say with his word picture is covered already in those first 4 verses. But in verses 5-8, Jesus circles back and he retells the story, but now with a different emphasis. We've got the basics, now he's got something more to say. Let's read on then. And let's see if we can spot the different emphasis in Jesus' retelling. So verse 5, I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and they're burned. If you remain in me, and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. So the first 4 verses emphasise Jesus' role as the true vine, faithful Israel. That's why the adjective true is not repeated with vine here in verse 5. Now, from verses 5 to 8, attention now turns to those who are connected, to the branches. This is what to do now that we are branches. And the key word here obviously is remain. In verse 5, we are called to remain in Jesus as he will remain in us. Now the word remain, which used to be translated as abide, literally means to live, to make home. We remain, we abide, we live in our homes. Our homes are our centre for doing life, for eating, for sleeping, for being family and welcoming friends. And so as branches, we are to make home with Jesus, in Jesus, just as he makes home in us by his Spirit. In this way, we're to anchor our lives in Jesus. Everything that we do and say, our relationships, our socialising, our relaxing, our security, our refuge from the world, these all now find their centre in Jesus. In a practical sense, that's what abiding in the vine looks like. Certainly our affections and our devotional life will give this expression, but being connected to the vine must also form our daily living. So there's a thought for your prayers in just a few moments. And just as we are making our home in and with Jesus, he's already made his home in us. But we can only live in one house at a time, only sleep in one bed at a time. If we are not remaining and abiding with Jesus, then we're disconnected, like a branch that's thrown away and withers, gets picked up and thrown in the fire. Why? Well, because it's useless. Disconnected, it will never produce grapes. You see, grapevines have a purpose. They're supposed to produce grapes, good fruit. And that was the problem with the nation of Israel back in Isaiah 5. It only produced the bad fruit of injustice and unrighteousness. But the true Israel, those who've been pruned clean by Jesus' word, and for us that's the scriptures, we are to produce fruit that lasts. What is that fruit? Well, whatever it is, it's the product of our prayers. That's the obvious implication of verse 7, right? Our earnest prayers, answered by God, produce the fruit. Let's give some more shape to this, though. Let's pray for the salvation of others. We live among a people who are far from God. They have no connection with Jesus, but they don't even know it. We live with family or dear friends who are disconnected from the life that is in Jesus. And without his life, they're as good as dead. It's just a matter of time, right? So let's pray that God would bring them to life, that in his kindness, they would be grafted into Jesus, the true vine, just as we have been. But there's more to this fruit. We are to produce the fruit of love. We know that because that's what Jesus says next, verse 9. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. if you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. I've told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Will you pray now that God will enable you to truly make home with Jesus as you are pruned, cleaned by his word, so that you will produce fruit, the fruit of answered prayer and the fruit of love?